How DLVU delicious people, and here to review Bloodlands. So I think immediately a lot of people will be like, wait a minute, he's using blood in a title? Probably shouldn't do that. When really looking at it right now, all I'm really concerned about is getting anybody interested in anything that I'm doing. Whether they go on to view, subscribe, do whatever you like. But like really right now, uh, I'm just wanting to go on and just find content, whatever that ends up being, and watch it and enjoy it and just kind of go on and find whatever thing that interests people the most. So I'm not going to hide this or lie about it. There was, of course, this one show called Stanley's Lucky Man that I went on and consistently saw and consistently watched. And so, really, I just had a hankering to find something somewhere similar to that. And so, all of a sudden, while I was like consistently searching and trying to find something ballparkingly similar, I found Bloodlands. And so I'm like, okay, like James Nesbitt seems to be doing quite a few detective shows. That seems to be interesting to me. And while I went through this first episode, I'm like, man, this episode is actually like, it has a really good story. And then I went on to find out that I guess that this show had multiple seasons. I think from where I went to go and watch this show, like I think I only saw the first season. But like I'll go on and start searching for more things to try to see if I can get a better thing of this. Currently, I think this is available on Amazon. I know there's also another show that I'm thinking about checking out with James Nesbitt in it. That is also on Amazon right now. But yeah, so I think you have to go on and like rent that show. But here's the thing. I would also go on and suggest people to do a number of things. You can go into a Google search and search the word letter C movies. So the letter C and then movies and app. You can go ahead and Google search this, go on and find this app, be able to download it, and more than likely you'd be able to see a hefty amount of things that you probably would have to have a exclusive whatever thing to go on and try to find. Whatever, like if you like Stars or Apple TV or HBO Max stuff and you can't conveniently have the money to pay for that kind of subscription, there is that app there. Here's another app. You can go into a Google search and search the word Fox HD Movies. You'll go on to an app that you'll find that Fox HD Movies is to what is to say on the logo, but the title will be something different. It'll be Play 1080p HD Movies. And by golly, if you go on and you get these two apps power combined together, you'll be able to see whatever you want at whatever point of time of life of which that you live. Here's a third app. It may not have this, but throw caution in the wind because it's convenient. Go into an Apple Google Play Store or a Google Play Store. Search the word TV Crush. Immediately, the thing that'll pop up after you search this is to be a app that has an HD movies with a crown in the logo. Go ahead and download that app also, and you'll be able to like you might not it might be a random thing that eventually you'll be able to find and see and whatever. It may not be Bloodlands, but by golly, there's sometimes a random amount of stuff that is conveniently on that app for you to go ahead and see. So now that I've gotten all that out of the way, let's go out of our way to describe and talk about this show and say that this episode I thoroughly enjoyed, because within this story we have uh, these of course detectives who are DCI detectives, and like I want to try to get the wordages and stuff correct, because I feel like I'm not going to. So there's that for you. So within this episode, we are to go on and find out that Tom, who is James Nesbitt's character, is to want to try and uh, go back into an old case that had been closed and the trail had gone cold for this case once before called Goliath, which was an assassin's case. And also, coincidentally, the case that Tom is actually getting involved in had something to do with his wife's disappearance. And so, because we oddly have it where Tom is just doing some kind of normal case, which all of a sudden ties into this Goliath case. And so now Tom is going to a man that he had worked with before with the DCI, and this of course is a guy named Jackie Tomley, Tommy, who is trying to stop Tom at every track to like force Tom to not try to go back into this case, to kind of keep this case dead for whatever reason. And we're trying to, within this episode, as well as a number of other episodes, figure out why. But really, like, I just kind of figured, I'm like, hey, like, let me just kind of watch this first episode. And I know kind of like the style of like Stanley's Lucky Man. Like, a lot of these episodes are like jam packed with so much information. So I'd figure it'd be a lot better to just kind of tackle one episode instead of just going and like, yeah, let me just review a whole entire season and I don't remember a lick of anything, because like a lot of these episodes have a lot of information, and bravo for the writing staff to have gone on and given us a show like this, where of course we have like a story that's kind of written very like interesting. Like it also kind of weirdly feels, in all actuality, that this could have been the uh, the next step of what possibly Stanley's Lucky Man could have been if you were to watch the total and complete end of it. You would think that this feels somewhat like a sequel in a way, uh, possibly. Even though we don't have a lucky bracelet really involved, it is what it is. Uh, but anyways, so let's go and double five this bad boy up. Let's just go into much more spoilers about this show. Let me know in the comments below if you have any interest in seeing Bloodlands, maybe because you had gone on and seen Stanley's Lucky Man for whatever reason. Maybe you're a little bit more intrigued or interested about the show, because it seemed that also while I was kind of thumbing through uh, like going through Amazon's, it was kind of funny, like seeing connections of certain shows after I kind of searched them out anyways, and then I realized like, oh, the same people that watch this show watch this one. Okay, what is this about? Okay, this seems interesting. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I get to spoil this show, this first episode. So In the very beginning of this episode, we have Tom, who is to go on and have a birthday party for his daughter Izzy, which I guess she is to have a boyfriend there. So, Tom, as a birthday present to Izzy, is to go on and give this uh, necklace to Izzy that was actually his. And Tom is to mention to Izzy that these necklaces that he had bought for him and his wife Emma, they were pairs. And so Tom later on in the episode is to mention the reason why he held on to that necklace so long, because he immediately thought that he was going to get reunited with his wife, and that's why he held on to that necklace for so long. But he realizes like he has to move on. Like it's like you only have so many like hours, so many days, so many like before you realize that a person who has gone missing is probably dead at that point, sadly. Especially with a case that we kind of go into in this episode that is like 20 some odd years uh, like in the making of having some more evidence to it. But let's kind of keep this thing kind of perfectly in line with how the episode kind of plays out. So Tom is to go on and give this necklace and mention that I guess Emma was to like say that she could like walk in the dark with this necklace on. Like it had no like glow in the dark properties or anything like that, but like weirdly enough. So we have Tom who is to of course I guess spend the night with Izzy, and then Tom of course to get a call stating that he has to go and be involved in some case. And so Tom of course is telling Izzy, it's like, well, hey, I gotta go work. And Izzy's like, okay, well, like I'll see ya. So Tom goes off to work, and he is to um, make it to this place where there's like these ferries and this kind of part of water. And so all of a sudden we have this crane that is retrieving this car out of this like ravine, and they find out that the owner of this car is actually Pat Keenan. And so all of a sudden we have like heavy amounts of water just pouring out of this car. And so as the car is to drop, they are to inspect the car to all of a sudden see this postcard from this certain location, which immediately Tom is to know exactly the reasoning for this postcard. It doesn't say really anything on it. It just has a picture of this location. And so Tom later on goes on and is to investigate that location, but he finds nothing there. But Tom then turns around and is to call Jackie and is to bring him to this location to say like, hey, like in this case that I was working on, I had gotten this postcard that was to remind me of this location that of course was to tie with the Goliath case. And Jackie's like, well, like, don't look into it. Like, I'm sure that your case that you're working on and the Goliath case like aren't connected. So like don't go on and like just kind of look for this missing man and like don't even think about the Goliath case. So Tom then goes on and is to speak with Keenan's wife, who's actually Claire Keenan. So Claire, I guess, is to have this business with these truckers or truck unloaders that they're kind of moving around these wood pallets. There's forklifts in the background. I'm not quite sure what exactly this business was, but it was just like, okay, there's a lot of familiar territory there. I was like, what the are they doing? But like, 'cause it just feels like they're like emptying a truck of what? But anyways, so it just feels like they're mostly just moving wood pallets. I'm like, okay. So we have both Tom and Maeve, who is his partner, going on to meet with Claire. And so Claire, of course, is tempted to try and call somebody else to help with this case because she doesn't know if these people are really going to be up for the job. And Maeve tells Claire that, like, hey, like, if anything, you should not go on and continue to tell other people about this case. If anything, we're going to do our best to try to figure this out. But, like, if anything, like, nobody's going to be able to get this case done faster than we can. So Claire, of course, is just very distraught, and so Tom goes on, and he of course is asking if these people have a toilet, and Claire goes, no, we just crap in our hands, and so Claire tells Tom where the toilet is, and so Tom instead decides to go and find, of course, Pat's office and starts rummaging through it. Starts to go through his schedule book to find out that he had a doctor's appointment. So, we have one guy who is to notice that Tom is lurking around, and so this guy is to go on to Claire and let him know or let her know what had happened, and so we then have both the officers leave this area. So now we transition to go on to this hospital where evidently Pat was going to the doctor because he had blurry eyes. And they were trying to figure out, like, why would this guy, like, have blurred eyes? And so all of a sudden they're going on to meet with this doctor, and the doctor kind of gives them like patient confidentiality that like I can't tell you anything, and so they kind of get the runaround. So all of a sudden we have Jackie that is starting to realize that Tom is going to look into the Goliath case. And so Jackie starts typing into the computer, possibly seeing if Tom is looking into this case, and nothing's quite coming up yet. So Jackie is like, Jackie goes on and wants every single file upon the Goliath case on his desk, because he wants to basically just try to have people not look into this for some weird reason. Maybe Jackie might be the Goliath killer after all. Who knows? So, Tom then goes on with Maeve, and they bump into some doctor named Tori, I believe. So, they all of a sudden bump into this doctor, and she conveniently mentions that she is being this teacher for these medical students. And Tom is like, "Oh, so you're gonna bump into my daughter then, because she's technically in medicine." And the nurse is like, "Oh, like, well, what is your daughter's name? Because maybe I'll see her at some point." And Tom is just like, "Oh yeah, like it's Izzy Brannick. She'll be the one chewing your ear off." And the doctor's like, "Oh, okay. Well, like Tom and Maeve just asks this doctor, it's like, well, like, why would somebody go on and possibly have like blurry eyes?" And this doctor goes on and says, like, "Well, I mostly deal with trauma, but I think that there's a possibility that this guy is to maybe theoretically use too much Viagra, or is to also be into other things that eventually is to give him blurred eyes." And so both Tom and Maeve are to realize that, I guess, Pat Keenan is to be known for consistently being with women, where he may pay for them or may not. So it seems like maybe Pat is having an affair, or possibly getting some paid loving. Because I guess he's not, sadly enough, getting any from his wife. So we have both Tom and Maeve that make it back to the police station. All of a sudden, we have these Molotov cocktails that get tossed on to this cop car, and we have both Tom and Maeve kind of springing into action. We have Tom kind of tossing his coat onto this one cop to kind of fan these flames, and we have a number of cops with fire extinguishers just spraying upon this car. So immediately people, I guess, are frustrated by this missing man and how like it isn't getting solved. So I guess people are in an uproar about this. And it's like, okay, like this is the same day. But we also have it where like people are also upset by how like the police force is kind of taking uh, what they're doing right now. Like it seems like people don't like what the police force is kind of doing in general right now. So like there's just a uprising going on and an unrest going on, and so Tom of course goes on and is to uh, now debrief uh, everyone about Pat Keenan and everything that they've learned so far. And so after that, we have Maeve, who's asking Tom about this postcard. It's like, I need to know about this postcard. And it seems, Tom, you know something and you're not telling me. And Tom is trying to keep something close to the vest. And Maeve is just like, well, you know what, I'm going to go on and I'm going to go to our superior. I'm going to go and talk to McAllister, and I'm going to tell her to just take me off the case. And Tom is like, wait a minute. Okay, I'll tell you. So Tom tells Maeve that in 1998, there was some like peace being spoken. And so in 1998, there was an assassin that was going around and taking people that were supposed runners, that were people who were either afraid to die or financially afraid, or they just had some kind of like they wrote them off as just kind of being these people that there was a reason for them going missing. So these people were just quickly written off. But Tom was to go on and say that this assassin, the reason why they tried so desperately to figure out a way to close this case was because supposedly the assassin was internally and possibly a police officer, him or herself. So Maeve is like, wow, like, okay. And also Tom is to tell Maeve that also the Goliath case was to tie into his wife's disappearance. And Maeve is like, oh my god. So Tom realizes more and more that this Pat Keenan case is really just tied to this Goliath case. Like, he's just giving in, just saying, like, you know what, like, these cases, there's something about it. So how about we just go on and go into the records room and find everything we can about the Goliath case. So they go into the records room and find out that every single thing is missing. And they're like, okay, that's weird. So, like, seriously, everything is gone? So they try to retroactively, because Tom technically knows the case, he's familiar with it, and so he starts to go on and mention these three men that were in the early stages of going missing. And so the one they kind of focus on right now is a guy named Joe Corey. And they focus on him because there is a possibility that Joe's brother Adam has possible information about this case, and so they're going to go and meet up with him. So Adam's brother Joe's disappearance was like 20 some odd years ago, and so Adam is kind of a little bit ticked off by the fact that these guys have taken forever to have any kind of new evidence or any relevancy and whatever about this. So really that's where we kind of focus here when we meet with Adam. But so we have Tom and of course Maeve go on and meet with Adam, and we of course have Adam, who is to talk about a number of like statements and stuff that people were to go on and say about this case. And because Adam was also trying to like poke around also, and so all of a sudden they go on and take this statement, and they decide to kind of follow up on it. And like the statement was kind of having it to where Tom was almost hesitant about wanting to go onto this little island and try to uncover possibly his own wife's body. And so he needed to take a little time to go on and watch a video of his wife, get a little teary-eyed possibly, and like decide whether or not like he wants to know these answers or not. Come to find out, Tom does. So Tom goes on, and they find this witness statement mentioning that there was possibly like some bodies over by a tree. And so they start digging up this certain area. They have a number of people who have these kind of devices that can kind of see through the ground in an almost like X-ray like way of doing things. So we have all these people coming in on these boats and everything like that. And so what ends up happening beforehand is we have it where Tom's superior, who is McAllister, ends up getting relieved of duty, and she either gets transferred or she gets fired. And so Tom is to realize that this is happening, and all of a sudden we have Jackie who comes in and is to be uh, the acting like boss of Tom. And Tom, of course, is asking Jackie, it's like, well, hey, like when I came to you, like I came to you as a friend, like hoping you would help me with this case. And Jackie's like, yes, and that's what I'm doing. And so Tom goes to Maeve and talks to Maeve and says, like, yeah, like Tom came here specifically to just sit on me, so I won't solve this case. And that's when Maeve is to give him this witness statement to just say, like, yeah, like we gotta go and check this out. So they follow up on this, and so Jackie is completely caught off guard by this, so much so that when he is to get the news by one of the officers about this, he goes and storms off and gets a boat to make his way to this island. And so Jackie is telling Tom, like, hey man, this is a waste of time. I had gotten this statement myself, and like, so we just found out that like Jackie was just sitting on this like gem that could have possibly solved this case the whole entire time, and Jackie decided to sit on it, which just frustrated Tom to no end. Just like, I could have been here a number of years ago getting closure from this case, and you have withheld this from me. So Tom just starts digging, and like nobody's really finding anything. And Jackie's telling Tom, like, hey man, give up, you're never gonna find anything. And so Tom goes on and is trying to continue to figure out where possibly Keenan could possibly be held. So while that's going on, we have Maeve, who is sticking around on this island because she notices that supposedly there was a tree nearby where these bodies were, and she decides to go on and realize that there's another tree on this island. And so they start taking devices, and they start digging, and they end up finding the bodies there. And they end up finding Tom's wife's body there with her necklace. So you can identify that body. And I'm like, oh my god. So Tom then goes on to find out that there is a vehicle that has Keenan's plates on the back of it. And so they're tracking down this car, and they find out that this is to go on to this hotel. And so they go to the room that supposedly Pat is in, and Pat is mentioning that there's a bomb on the door of this. So we have this bomb disposal unit woman who goes on and is to like put a camera underneath the door. And while she's looking at this, she's realizing that this bomb, of course, is a hoax. They open the door. Pat Keenan is handcuffed to, assuming some part of the wall, some heater or something. So Tom, of course, is to kind of try and comfort Pat, like, hey man, like, we got you. So they go on and they uncuff Pat and they get him the heck out of there. So like at least that is solved. One person is not to go on and get buried here. But we of course have possibly this Goliath character who leaves another calling card. And it's like, okay, so what is this about? So that's of course when Tom is to get this call, and he is to rush to this location because they found the bodies. They found Emma's body. Now they can go on and possibly bury uh, Emma the right way, as well as a number of other people, realizing that they had all died. They are all dead, so on and so forth. And so, really, for the most point, without me going on and mentioning the one point where Tom was to re-meet up with Izzy, and like that's the whole dialogue where he goes on and talks about that necklace more, and talking about how he's thinking at one point that he was going to get reunited with his wife with the same necklace, but now we find out that that necklace is to be the one proof thing about this body. So now we go on and like that's really for the most point a wrapping of this episode, and so really we'll get into other episodes and see how this all unfolds. Try to do my best to just try and describe this episode for the most point. There's a lot of details, there's a lot to unpack, there's a lot to unravel. But yeah, we also had at one point where the one teacher was to go on into his class and was to notice the name and was to notice the girl, and she's like, like, so I will know this girl. And that's when of course Izzy is to make it out of the class. That's when she meets with her father, and dialogue of which that I've already said. So yeah, so I'm kind of wondering if this doctor eventually is going to end up being possibly a woman for Tom, maybe, or maybe Tom is just gonna be like, well, you know what, like there's some old wounds that have just reopened, and like maybe he's not ready yet, which is perfectly okay. But yeah, so with that said, that technically covers most of this episode, but um not the best, not the most perfect. We also had like Jackie, who is telling Tom that Tom should have needed to go on and talked to Claire and tried to work things out to make her happy. But Tom was too focused on this island, and eventually it paid out. Because we also had a number of people, like a number of reporters that were going on and kind of being very concerned that these people weren't going to go on and focus too much upon this case, or it doesn't feel like they were doing much work about it. There are people that were on the news going on and kind of saying their opinion about this case and this Pat Keenan situation, and so on and so forth. So we'll probably see maybe in the future if any of the other cases are to reconnect at some point to what eventually will be this story. But with that said, I think I'm going to try and get out of here, because at the end of the day, I think it's time to say goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. Let me know in the comments below if if you went on to watch this show, and if you are intrigued, or if you're just like, I don't know. Maybe you just like detective shows, and that's good enough for you. So at the end of the day, I'm going to say bye, everybody.